It started as a routine confirmation hearing, quiet room, stiff suits, the usual political theater, but within seconds, everything cracked open. One senator leaned forward, eyes locked, voice steady, and dropped a question so sharp the entire chamber froze. It wasn't about policy. It wasn't about qualifications on paper. It was about something far deeper, far more uncomfortable. The one thing a nominee can't hide behind talking points or prepared statements: character. And in that moment, the hearing transformed into something no one was ready for.
Thank you, Mr. Hegseth. I'm looking forward to this opportunity to talk. I want to return to the incident that you referenced a minute ago that occurred in Monterey, California in October 2017. At that time, you were still married to your second wife, correct?
I believe so.
And you had just fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct?
Senator, I was falsely charged, fully investigated, and completely cleared.
So you think you were completely cleared because you committed no crime? That's your definition of cleared? You had just fathered a child 2 months before by a woman that was not your wife. I am shocked that you would stand here and say you're completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you are completely cleared?
Senator,
how is that a complete clear?
Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And she was, and you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges.
Well,
it was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I am so grateful for the marriage I have to this amazing woman behind me.
You've admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017. You said it was consensual, isn't that correct?
Anything?
You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a child by another woman.
Again,
how do you explain your judgment?
Completely false charges against me. You fully investigated, and I was completely clear.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
So you're
talking about a hypothetical.
So you can't tell me whether someone who has committed a sexual assault is disqualified from being Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I know in my instance, and I'm talking about my instance only, it was a false claim.
But you acknowledge,
investigated.
That you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered a child. You have admitted that.
I will allow your words to speak for themselves.
You're not retracting that today. That's good. I assume that in each of your weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
Senator, as I've acknowledged to everyone in this committee, not a perfect person, not claiming to be.
But no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath like you would take an oath to be Secretary of Defense in all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife. Is that correct?
I have failed in things in my life, and thankfully I'm redeemed by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
In finalizing divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But if there were, you would agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my responsibility.
Did you ever engage in any acts of physical violence against any of your wives?
Senator, absolutely not.
But you would agree with me that if someone had committed physical violence against a spouse, that would be disqualifying to serve as Secretary of Defense, correct?
Senator, absolutely not have I ever done that.
You would agree that that would be a disqualifying offense, would you not?
Senator, you're talking about a hypothetical.
I don't think it's a hypothetical. Violence against spouses occurs every day. And if you as a leader are not capable of saying that physical violence against a spouse should be a disqualifying fact for being secretary of the most powerful nation in the world, you're demonstrating an astonishing lack of judgment. The incident in Monterey led to a criminal charge, a criminal investigation, a private settlement, and a cash payment to the woman who filed the complaint. And there was also a non-disclosure agreement, correct?
It was a confidential settlement agreement off of a nuisance lawsuit.
Right. During an interview, you claimed that you settled the matter because you were worried that if it became public, it might hurt your career. Do you maintain that you were blackmailed?
Senator, I maintain that false claims were made against me. And ultimately,
your attorney
those
used
false
the
claims,
phrase,
I have the opportunity to attest my innocence in those false claims.
But you didn't reveal any of this to President Trump or the transition team as they were considering you to be nominated for Secretary of Defense. You didn't reveal the action. You didn't reveal the criminal complaint. You didn't reveal the criminal investigation. You didn't reveal the settlement. You didn't reveal the cash payment. Why didn't you inform the commander-in-chief and the transition team of this very relevant event?
Senator, I've appreciated every part of the process with the transition team. They have been open and honest with me. We've had great conversations between the two of us. And I appreciate the opportunity that President-elect Trump has given me.
You chose not to reveal this, right? Because you knew it would hurt your chances. So you chose not to reveal this really important thing to the commander-in-chief and the transition team because you were worried about your chances rather than trying to be candid with the future president of the United States. Are there any other important facts that you chose not to reveal to the president-elect and his team as they were considering you to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I sit here before you an open book, as everyone who's watched this process.
With multiple non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements tying the hands of many people who would like to comment to us. Much has been made of your workplace behavior as a leader of nonprofit veterans organizations and as a Fox News contributor. Were you fired from either of the leadership positions with the nonprofits?
I was the leader. I was the CEO of Concerned Veterans for America and the executive director of Vets for Freedom.
Were you fired from either of them?
And I was never fired from a veterans organization.
Do you have non-disclosure agreements with either of those organizations?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator.
Many of your work colleagues have said that you show up for work under the influence of alcohol or drunk. I know you've denied that, but you would agree with me, right, that if that was the case, that would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense.
Senator, those are all anonymous false claims, and the totality
they're not anonymous.
The letters on the record here.
They're not anonymous.
On the record,
we've seen records with names attached to them.
Vets for Freedom, Concerned Vets for America, and Fox News
attributing
to me being working hard every day on behalf of
one of your
mission.
colleagues said that you got drunk at an event at a bar and chanted, "Kill all Muslims." Another colleague, not anonymous, we have this, said that you took co-workers to a strip club. You were drunk, you tried to dance with strippers, you had to be held off the stage, and one of your employees in that event filed a sexual harassment charge as a result of it. Now, I know you denied these things, but isn't that the kind of behavior that, if true, would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, anonymous false charges.
They're not anonymous. And I'll just conclude and say this to the chairman. You claim that this was all anonymous. We have seen records with names attached to all of these, including the name of your own mother. So don't make this into some anonymous press thing. We have seen multiple names of colleagues consistently throughout your career that have talked about your abusive actions,
Chairman,
attitudes,
I think he's
words,
over
and
his time. He's way over his time.
I now yield.
And thank you very much. I now ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a family court order concerning the appointment of parenting time between Mr. Hegseth and Mrs. Samantha Hegseth. It states that there were no claims of domestic abuse or probable evidence of abuse in the relationship. Without objection, that will be added to the record.
What unfolded next wasn't a debate. It wasn't a disagreement. It was a dismantling. A confrontation so blunt, so unfiltered, that even longtime observers said they had never seen anything quite like it. Because this wasn't just a challenge. It was an accusation wrapped inside a timeline, tied to a child's birth, personal vows, confidential agreements, and a past that refused to stay buried. And when the nominee tried to brush it all off with a simple, completely cleared, the senator responded with a ferocity that sent shockwaves through the room. What happened next turned the hearing into a spectacle that millions would soon replay. The senator dug straight into the Monterey incident, a night the nominee would probably erase if he could. A night in October 2017 that didn't just raise questions but ignited an entire investigation. The senator pointed out every detail of the timeline like a prosecutor laying out evidence. Married to one woman, child just born from another, and a hotel encounter with a third individual, one that triggered criminal accusations, later dropped, but never forgotten. And instead of addressing the moral weight of it, the nominee stuck to one sentence over and over. False charges, fully investigated, completely cleared. But this wasn't about guilt or innocence. The senator wasn't asking the legal system to rule. He was asking about judgment, about loyalty, about what a person chooses to do when no one is watching. And hearing him repeat the same line only pushed the senator harder, each question sharper than the last. The room shifted when the senator asked the question nobody expected out loud. How does someone who violated promises at home look the American people in the eye and claim flawless integrity? The nominee stiffened. The cameras zoomed in, and the senator pressed again. He asked whether the nominee took vows at his weddings, whether he pledged faithfulness, whether breaking those vows was something he called being completely cleared. The nominee tried to pivot, mentioning redemption, faith, not being a perfect person. But the senator refused to let him escape into vague answers. Because to him, this wasn't gossip. It wasn't petty. It was about trustworthiness. If someone pledges loyalty in their personal life and breaks it, what happens when they pledge loyalty in public office? If promises at home crumble, how can promises to a nation stand firm? It was a moment that left the nominee visibly uncomfortable, and for many watching, it raised a question they couldn't ignore. Is someone's personal life fair game when they're being handed the keys to enormous power? But the senator wasn't finished. Not even close. Just when the nominee thought he'd survived the most painful line of questioning, the conversation turned towards something he clearly didn't want to discuss: the confidential agreements. The senator brought up divorces, settlements, the possibility of NDAs that might silence people who knew more. He asked whether the nominee would release his previous spouses from confidentiality. The nominee said he wasn't aware of any. The senator fired back. If there were, would you release them? Again, the nominee dodged, saying it wasn't his responsibility. The exchange carried a chilling undertone, hinting that there were pieces of the story the public had never heard, not because they were false, but because they were legally sealed away. Whether that was true or not, the senator's point was unmistakable. Leadership demands transparency, and anything hidden behind legal barriers will always cast a shadow, no matter how forcefully someone claims innocence. Then the hearing turned darker. The senator shifted from personal life to workplace behavior, a new layer of controversy, one filled with accusations from former colleagues. And he didn't treat them lightly. Reports claiming the nominee showed up to work under the influence. Allegations that he made offensive remarks at a bar. Accounts of strip club outings with coworkers where he supposedly had to be pulled off a stage. One complaint even described harassment. The nominee dismissed every charge as anonymous, as if that single word erased them. But the senator countered immediately, revealing that the committee had names attached to the allegations, people who weren't hiding behind anonymity. The weight of that revelation was heavy. Cameras captured the nominee's immediate discomfort. He repeated that the claims were false, but the senator hammered home the bigger concern. Even if a fraction of these stories were true, the behavior would be disqualifying for someone expected to lead and discipline others at the highest level. And if these stories weren't disclosed voluntarily, what else was being kept quiet? The most damaging moment came when the senator revealed a fact that stunned the room. During the nomination process, the nominee never disclosed the Monterey incident, the investigation, the settlement, or the payment connected to the complaint. Not to the transition team, not to the people evaluating him, not to the leaders who were supposed to know everything before making their decision. The senator didn't sugarcoat it. He said plainly that withholding something so significant looked less like an oversight and more like a calculated choice. A choice made to protect personal ambition over transparency. The nominee tried to deflect again, insisting the transition team had been open and honest with him, but the senator shut that door instantly. The issue wasn't whether they were honest, it was whether he was. And the answer, based on the timeline, was becoming harder to believe. Each question landed like a blow, not because they were loud or dramatic, but because they were precise and tied to documented events. The senator wasn't building a conspiracy. He was walking through a sequence of facts: a criminal complaint, an investigation, a settlement, an NDA, workplace allegations, reports from colleagues, inconsistencies in judgment. And each answer from the nominee seemed to deepen the tension instead of relieving it. By this point, the hearing had moved far beyond political theater. It had become a test of credibility, and the nominee was struggling to keep up. The senator then pushed into the subject of violence in relationships, carefully but firmly. He asked whether the nominee had ever engaged in physical aggression toward any spouse. The nominee answered absolutely not. But the senator didn't stop there. He asked whether someone who had committed violence against a partner would be disqualified from leadership. The nominee refused to engage the hypothetical. He kept saying the senator was talking about something unrelated. But the senator snapped back that domestic violence isn't hypothetical. It happens every day. His point was powerful. A leader must be capable of recognizing unacceptable behavior and saying clearly that it disqualifies someone. And if a nominee cannot do that, it raises questions about the moral compass they claim to possess. The nominee didn't answer. The silence was telling. The senator went further, bringing up the confidential settlement tied to the Monterey incident. The nominee argued it was a nuisance lawsuit, but the senator countered with a detail pulled straight from the nominee's own past interview. He had once admitted settling partly because he feared the story going public could harm his career. That statement undercut the idea that it was simply a nuisance. It suggested there was something to hide, something that could damage his public standing. Whether that meant guilt or just fear didn't matter. The senator's argument was simple. If someone wants to lead the military, honesty cannot depend on convenience. Why now? The nominee's pattern was becoming clear. Avoid specifics. Repeat that allegations were false. Claim full exoneration without acknowledging the underlying conduct. The senator highlighted that pattern, pointing out how many times the nominee had tried to minimize or dodge. And then he delivered the line that many would quote afterward: "Don't make this into some anonymous press thing." He said they had names on record: colleagues, supervisors. Even the nominee's own mother had weighed in during past disputes. The senator wasn't just suggesting the nominee had a troubled past. He was implying that the nominee had built a wall of denial so high that even documented statements from people he once worked with couldn't break through it. The nominee insisted he was an open book. The senator pushed back immediately, questioning how someone with multiple confidentiality agreements, sealed settlements, and undisclosed accusations could call themselves transparent. For the audience watching, the contrast was brutal. One side hammering with precise details, the other responding with generic lines that didn't match the intensity of the questions. And in that imbalance, the truth became harder to ignore. As the hearing neared its end, the senator delivered one final blow. He requested to enter a family court order into the record, not to accuse the nominee of something new, but to clarify that the court found no evidence of abuse in one particular relationship. It showed the senator wasn't manipulating facts. He was drawing a line between confirmed findings and unresolved allegations. And that move made his earlier questions even more powerful. He wasn't attacking blindly. He was testing honesty, testing trust, testing judgment. And when the nominee repeatedly fell back into evasiveness, the senator let the silence speak louder than any accusation ever could. By the time the exchange ended, the hearing had turned into something far bigger than one man's nomination. It became a broader conversation about leadership, about how personal conduct intersects with public responsibility, about whether someone can demand integrity from others while refusing to fully confront their own past. And for many watching, the lesson was clear: power doesn't erase history. Position doesn't cancel accountability. And someone who avoids answering the hard questions may not be fit to ask others to follow them. Whether the nominee was guilty or innocent wasn't the only issue. The real story was how he responded, how he dodged, how he repeated the same lines despite being confronted with details he couldn't explain away. And in a world where leadership requires trust, those moments matter. They reveal more than any resume or speech ever could. But the biggest question still hangs in the air. If this was how he handled pressure in a controlled hearing, what happens when the pressure isn't controlled? When the stakes are higher? When honesty isn't optional? If you found this breakdown revealing, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive. The next video is even more intense, and trust me, you'll want to see it.